Welcome back. You're watching The Agenda. We take you to developments coming out of Tshwane this hour, where we just heard the Madlanga Commission of Inquiry has just adjourned to iron out some few issues, particularly around that, application to have some of those proceedings be heard in camera. We'll take you there now, where colleagues Ayanda, Nyathi, as well as Canny, Maphanga on standby just to make sense of it all for us this hour. So, Ayanda, the Commission has just decided to adjourn. Talk us through why was that adjournment decided on?
Yeah, it's exactly as we had predicted. Mxolisi, welcome back to the Bridget Mabandla Justice College. We knew that there would be an adjournment at some stage because of the opposition to that application that we now know on record has been presented by News 24 and the Daily Maverick. Canny Maphanga is also here to break it all down for us. Few people in the room were surprised.
Yeah, indeed. We've seen that two media houses that have been extensively covering through their investigations units these various stories that surround the PKTT and the disbandment of the PKTT. They obviously have an interest in the matter along with the public, and of course are seeking to challenge the ruling, or I guess the state of what they wanted to present as in-camera hearings as far as it stands right now. It's difficult to understand what grounds they will be advancing. Of course, they'll obviously deal with the fact that this is an area that News 24 and Daily Maverick have been reporting on, and of course that this is information that is in the public interest. But the true details surrounding their opposition will only come later in the afternoon, after about 1 p.m. when we expect them to file. Then you've heard the evidence leader, that is Advocate Matthew Chaskerson SC, state that they can give their answer at 5 p.m. And the Commission has already clarified whether or not these parties seek to have this dispute dissolved through an oral hearing, and we're hearing that both of them are satisfied with seeking an answer on the papers. This means that the Commission will have to consider the application and the opposition to the application, and of course can now give their answer in the form of their ruling on paper. So it doesn't have to come tomorrow as a full-on application. Following that ruling, that is when we'll know what the way forward for the Madlanga Commission will be, whether or not it will proceed with in-camera hearings, or if the opposing parties were successful, and maybe some of it or all. You don't know what the conclusion will be. Will now be open to the public. We now know that we're in the realm of the sensitive phase 1 evidence. That is possibly your GCI ops, your PKTT, those that have very sensitive information surrounding the operations of the police, which is at the center of this very critical probe. So we await to see what the chairperson and his co-commissioners will decide on with respect to the application on the papers. But of course, if this application is not successful with respect to the opposition, that still leaves them room to challenge it further in a court of law. But we don't want to get to that stage yet. Let's rather see what the filings will be, those written arguments. Again, by 1 o'clock, we expect that News 24 and Daily Maverick would have filed. And then by 5 p.m., the evidence leaders will give their response. And then, of course, it's up to the Commission to give their answer on paper.
And we actually don't know when that is, which I think is important to emphasize. But regardless of when that outcome is going to be delivered, it's going to be precedent setting.
Yes, indeed. I think we discussed this earlier, that commissions have had in the past sensitive information that has had to have been shielded to some extent. However, we haven't seen a complete exclusion of the public. So, for example, in the Zondo Commission, where you had witnesses from crime intelligence to come deal with evidence relating to the slush fund at the time, some of those evidences, or rather the witnesses, were in camera, but you could still hear the oral testimony, and the public was still allowed entry into the Commission and its hearings. However, in this instance, you're seeing a complete blanket ruling, or rather a rule stating that when it goes in camera, that the media cannot participate at any level in that hearing, meaning that you'll be shut out completely from this portion of the testimony. We know that the public have a great interest in it, and of course the story has already begun for many media houses that have been reporting on it, and of course course, there'll be this major gap if you were to exclude them from these hearings. But there's also responsibility and an obligation to protect the witnesses that are participating in this highly, highly sensitive probe. So it's a balancing act of the public interest and, of course, the sensitive information before the commission that retired Justice Madlanga and his co-commissioners have to consider now with this public application that is being made, whether it is in the interest of the public to have this information, what about the witnesses, their rights, their needs to be protected, how can you safeguard that, and then of course ensuring that the public have a right to know and they have a full lens into this very important probe, which you're told is transparent as much as it can possibly be. However, we are reaching those difficult moments where there is information that must be presented. It's of a sensitive nature, and now you have opposition to this particular application, and now it must be a balance between the competing rights that are placed before this commission.
It'll be interesting to also see if the chairperson will give reasons, because it's from that kind of, I suppose, world that we'll be able to understand the legal principles that both parties relied on.
I would expect that the commission itself, once it gives that judgment or that ruling on paper, that sufficient reasons would follow should any aggrieved party wish to take it forward. But of course, also for the public to know whether or not, for whatever the reason may be, if either side wins, whether it's that the hearing should be shielded from the public or they should have an interest as to why they reached that appropriate conclusion, so that the process remains transparent in the eyes of the public. We've seen that this commission, although it's garnered a lot of interest from the public, it also has adversely attracted a lot of conspiracy theories. So it's important to keep this process in the full light or full glare of the public lens, and every step or decision that is taken must be explained sufficiently to the public to avoid that kind of adverse impact.
Absolutely. Canny Maphanga, thanks very much indeed. It's a waiting game from here on. You've heard people in the past say perhaps the best disinfectant is sunlight, but I wonder to what extent that will be legally sound insofar as the arguments are made from both News 24 and Daily Maverick side, and whether or not the commission will be able to push back sufficiently. But whatever happens, the SABC is certainly keeping a firm grounding on the situation here, and we'll get you those updates as soon as we get them.
Right, gender anchor Ayanda Nyathi there for us. Thanks so much indeed for that update. Certainly all eyes and ears on it as it continues to develop there.